Think about this honestly. No filters, no romance, no Disney fairy tale, illusions. What actually happens to most men after marriage? Their friend group evaporates. Their hobbies slowly die off. Their free time gets swallowed whole by responsibilities that never end. Their money stops being their money and instantly becomes our money, with their deciding how it gets spent, justified under the noble banner of family. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. None of this happens by accident. It happens by structure. It happens by design. It happens because marriage, in its modern form, strategically relocates a man from independent human to dependable utility. Women intuitively understand something men often don't. A man becomes exponentially more valuable to the relationship when the rest of his life becomes smaller. The fewer options he has, the fewer connections he maintains, the fewer escapes he can turn to, the more completely he dedicates his energy, resources, and sanity to maintaining the marriage. Piece by piece, step by step, one harmless compromise at a time, his independent life is dismantled, not overtly, not aggressively, but subtly, like emotional erosion happening beneath the surface. By the time he notices the emptiness, he isn't questioning the system. He's questioning himself, because the absolute genius and cruelty of this system is that it uses a man's best qualities to trap him: his desire to be a good husband, his instinct to provide, his dedication to stability, his commitment to his children, his loyalty, his desire to do the right thing. These virtues become the very chains that keep him in place. He collaborates in his own depletion because resisting it feels selfish. He's taught that sacrifice equals love, and the more he gives up, the better man he becomes. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But for the modern married man, the truly terrifying moment is realizing just how much of himself he's already surrendered without ever noticing the transaction taking place. Look at our language. Ball and chain. The old ball and chain. Hitched. Taking the plunge. Game over. Our culture unconsciously admits the truth that men consciously try to ignore. Marriage is not portrayed as a gain of freedom. It's portrayed as the end of it. But here's where this gets truly disturbing. The system not only exploits men, it conditions them to feel grateful for the exploitation. Happy wife, happy life. A phrase so common that people forget how psychologically violent it really is. It teaches men that their emotional well-being is irrelevant, that their happiness is conditional, that their role is to maintain her emotional universe, while suppressing their own needs in silence. That's not partnership. That's conditioning. That's servitude with sentimental branding. And here's the lethal irony. Men don't even realize it's happening until it's too late. Marriage doesn't take a man's freedom overnight. It drains him drip by drip, in tiny decisions that look harmless in isolation, but devastating in accumulation. Skip guy's night because she's upset. Switch your hobbies to what she approves of. Cancel your plans because the kids need something. Hand over your paycheck because it's better for the family. Take responsibility for issues you didn't create just to keep the peace. None of these choices seem big enough to resist, until one day he wakes up, looks in the mirror, and sees a version of himself he doesn't recognize. A tired, domesticated version who exists to solve problems, fix crises, absorb emotions, and endlessly be the rock while slowly crumbling inside. And society calls this maturity. Society applauds this transformation. Society rewards a man who gives up everything and punishes the man who dares protect his own identity. Because the harsh truth is this: a man who prioritizes himself is dangerous to the system. A man who prioritizes his family at the cost of himself is celebrated by it. This entire world runs on men who are willing to drain themselves dry for people who will never fully understand the cost. And marriage, in its modern form, is the perfect machine for keeping that system running. After a man finally notices the first cracks forming in his marriage, the most frightening part isn't the conflict. It's the slow internal erosion that follows. Because once the early illusions fade, Once he starts recognizing the patterns he ignored for years, he begins to see something far darker than simple disagreements or personality clashes. He begins to see his own disappearance. Not physically, not financially, but psychologically. Piece by piece, a married man is taught to suppress the parts of himself that once made him feel alive. And the tragedy isn't that someone forces him. It's that he willingly silences himself in the name of keeping the peace, in the name of being a good husband, in the name of love that stopped feeling like love long ago. He stops sharing his frustrations because every frustration becomes an argument. He stops expressing needs because every need becomes an accusation. He stops standing his ground because every boundary becomes a battle he's too tired to fight. So he adapts. He learns to walk quietly through his own life. He learns to calculate every sentence before he speaks it. He learns that honesty is dangerous, transparency is costly, and emotional expression is unwelcome unless it benefits someone else. This is the part no one warns men about. Marriage trains a man to believe that his emotions are liabilities. If he's overwhelmed, he's not helping enough. If he's stressed, he's overreacting. If he's exhausted, he's unavailable. If he tries to set limits, he's selfish. If he pushes back, he's uncaring. Every emotional signal he emits gets reframed as a personal flaw until eventually he stops emitting anything at all. And nobody notices, because silence looks like stability, because compliance looks like love, because the more he gives, the less anyone questions how much he's losing. But inside, something irreversible is happening. A man begins to feel like a ghost in his own home, present, functional, useful, but no longer seen, heard, or valued as a human being. What started as love quietly transforms into duty. What started as partnership becomes obligation. What started as connection becomes performance. He becomes the emotional shock absorber, the financial engine, the background structure that keeps everything running, yet receives none of the admiration, affection, or respect that once came so effortlessly at the beginning. And the cruel irony is this: the more stable he is, the more invisible he becomes, because predictability isn't attractive, dependability isn't exciting, consistency isn't rewarded, it's taken for granted. Slowly, subtly, almost imperceptibly, the admiration that once fueled him evaporates, and what replaces it is something far more painful than anger: indifference. She doesn't ask how he's feeling, because she assumes he's fine. She doesn't check on his stress because she assumes he can handle it. She doesn't think about what he wants because she assumes he shouldn't need anything. And that's when a man begins to experience the most psychologically devastating stage of all: the respect collapse. The moment she stops respecting him, the relationship becomes a machine, and he becomes one of its gears. No desire, no appreciation, no emotional intimacy. Just a system of tasks, expectations, and endless responsibilities. He becomes useful, not loved. He becomes needed, not desired. He becomes tolerated, not admired. And when a man reaches this stage, a stage he never saw coming, a stage he never believed possible, he finally realizes the darkest truth about modern marriage. It doesn't destroy a man in one blow. It destroys him through thousands of small cuts. A forgotten thank you, a dismissed concern, a quiet eye roll, a lack of intimacy, a sarcastic comment, a cold shoulder, a week of emotional distance disguised as stress. One by one, each cut is small, but together, they hollow him out from the inside. He becomes a shell of a man he used to be, still standing, still functioning, but emotionally decomposed. And the saddest part? Nobody notices the collapse until he's already gone. And here's the part men never say out loud. Not to their friends, not to their families, not even to themselves. When a man finally breaks in a marriage, he doesn't break loudly. He breaks quietly. Women cry, yell, vent, explode. Men implode. And when a man implodes, nobody hears it. But it changes everything. He stops dreaming, stops planning, stops imagining a future where he matters. Because slowly he begins to realize something horrifying. He could vanish, and life around him would continue the same. Dinner would still get made. Bills would still arrive. Arguments would still happen. The silence he lived in would simply become the silence he left behind. That's when the truth hits him. Marriage didn't give him a partner. It made him replaceable. Not because she doesn't care. Not because she's evil. But because the system taught her that his effort is expected, his sacrifices are normal, and his suffering is invisible. And once a man realizes he's replaceable, something inside him snaps into a new, dangerous clarity. He begins to see the entire structure for what it truly is. Not a bond of love, but a system of extraction. His labor keeps the home running. His money keeps the lifestyle afloat. His emotional stability absorbs her emotional storms. His silence keeps the peace. His compliance prevents the collapse. He is the glue, the anchor, the load-bearing wall of the entire relationship. But glue is never admired. Anchors are never thanked. Walls are never appreciated. They're expected until they crack. And this is where the final betrayal occurs. The one that breaks a man beyond repair. When he finally reaches his limit. When he finally admits he's struggling. When he finally opens up and asks for help. He hears the 6 words that shatter a man more than any argument. You're not the man I married. Of course he's not. He became the man she needed. He became the man who carried everything. He became the man who sacrificed his identity, his hobbies, his peace, his joy, his spark, just to maintain a relationship that demanded more than any human could give. But those sacrifices don't make him loved. They make him expected. And expectations turn even the strongest man into an emotional casualty. Yet here's the twist, the part that blindsides every man who survives the psychological collapse. The moment he stops bending, the moment he reclaims his boundaries, the moment he begins rebuilding himself, the entire dynamic flips. Because a man rediscovering his strength forces everyone around him to confront the truth they ignored. He wasn't weak. He was exhausted. He wasn't distant. He was drowning. He wasn't unloving. He was unloved. A man who rises from that wreckage becomes someone dangerous, not to her, not to society, but to the system that depended on his silence. Because once a man realizes how easily he was controlled through guilt, he becomes immune to guilt. Once he sees how his fear kept him compliant, he becomes immune to fear. Once he understands how his devotion was used as leverage, he becomes immune to manipulation. He stops apologizing for things he didn't do. He stops negotiating with people who don't respect him. He stops prioritizing someone else's comfort over his own sanity. He becomes something incredibly rare, a man who cannot be emotionally enslaved. And here's the beautiful, terrifying truth. When a man becomes whole again, he loves differently, not weaker, not colder, but cleaner, sharper, more consciously, without losing himself in the process. He no longer begs for appreciation. He no longer accepts disrespect. He no longer trades his identity for companionship. Instead, he stands in the center of his own life, and anyone who wants to join him must meet him at eye level, not above, not below, equal, because the man who has died inside a marriage and rebuilt himself afterwards is no longer afraid of being alone. He has already survived the deepest loneliness, the loneliness inside a relationship. What comes after that is freedom. And for the first time in his life, he finally understands his true worth.